Hi guys, it's Kirsty. In today's video, I want to talk about shoulds and musts and the way we inflict shoulds and musts upon ourselves and how it can help fuel the anxiety or OCD cycle. But before I go into that, I would like to ask, please do subscribe by clicking on the subscribe button below in order to stay up to date with new videos as they're released. So this video is mostly based on the first book on the reading list for OCD recovery, which is written by Albert Ellis, named How to Stubbornly Refuse to Make Yourself Miserable About Anything. Yes, anything. So this book is focused on the therapy type of REBT, which stands for Rational Emotive Behavioural Therapy. And you will have heard that referred to a lot on this channel in relation to unconditional acceptance. So if you scroll through previous videos, you'll find there are lots of videos about acceptance generally, but other videos about unconditional self-acceptance and life acceptance and other acceptance. So this is what Albert Ellis kind of teaches in his book, that we aim to get to the point of unconditional acceptance in order to reduce our emotional suffering, whether that emotional suffering comes from whether it's anxiety or depression or rage. These emotions are all considered to be kind of emotional disturbances. They're one step further from healthy kind of negative emotions such as concern or sadness or irritation perhaps. So in this book, Albert Ellis teaches us to change irrational beliefs into rational beliefs on the basis that irrational beliefs are what cause these emotional disturbances. So we can work on gaining unconditional acceptance by changing irrational beliefs into rational beliefs. And this is where language comes into play. So this is why I wanted to do the video about shoulds and musts, because there's a lot of talk, there's been a lot of previous discussion about orphalizing and black and white thinking in other videos that I've done. So I've talked a lot about how we fuel our anxiety or low moods by thinking, by holding beliefs that something is awful and I can't tolerate it. Also that we fuel our anxiety feelings about ourselves by saying I'm an awful person if I think this or I do this. But also there are other kind of ways that we can contribute to our emotional suffering, where we have beliefs that strongly hold on to words such as should and must. So for example, I want to offer several examples of irrational beliefs that we might hold that fuel our anxiety or OCD that have the words should and must in them. And so this is a way that you can, if you're sort of still stuck after kind of working on not awfulizing something as much, you might then want to start looking for, well, where am I saying I should be doing this, or I must be doing this, or the world must be this way, or else I can't stand it. Before I give some examples of shoulds and musts that we might be using with ourselves, I want to just let you know the way that Albert Ellis refers to shoulds and musts. So he refers to get his message across, he refers to shoulds. If we use too many shoulds for ourselves, he says that we're shoulding all over ourselves, essentially, as if we were to say, I'm shitting all over yourself. Essentially, you're making things worse for yourself by holding so many beliefs, thinking things should be a certain way. And he refers to the overuse of the word must in our beliefs as masturbation, but he says it's the opposite to masturbation, in that masturbation is really bad because, again, it contributes to our emotional disturbances. I just wanted to mention that because it did tickle me when I was reading the book. So I want to give some examples of shoulds and musts now in terms of how it would fuel our suffering with OCD and anxiety. So the first one I want to give is one of my own that I had, saying that I must be recovered by a certain point. you know, I must be doing better in my recovery. So once I'd started to work on my recovery and seen a bit of progress, I struggled with accepting initially like relapses or setbacks, as we might call it. And again, several videos we've done previously, so like a few of us have made videos on this channel about setbacks. It's very important to cover this because, you know, how we deal with setbacks, you know, affects how we go, you know, move forward with our OCD recovery and anxiety recovery going forward. So initially, when I was having kind of initial setback, I was making it worse, saying that I must not feel this way because I've been working on my recovery for this amount of time. I was doing well and I must not feel this way. And of course, what I was doing to myself then was adding to my suffering. So I was already suffering because I'd had a bit of a setback and I was feeling anxious again. But then I was beating myself up about that with my imaginary rules that I was making, that I must not feel this way because I've been working on my recovery for a certain amount of time. So I was then making myself feel angry at myself, angry at the world about the fact that I wasn't doing as well as I felt that I should be doing. So this was a big thing. So this really, working on my shoulds and musts in relation to my OCD recovery was a big factor in my OCD recovery, because I started to practice not getting as down about the setbacks. And of course, then once you remove that layer of kind of misery from the situation, you're left to deal better with what's actually there. It's like, okay, I'm anxious again. I've had a setback. Now what are we going to do going forward? So can you see how this, working on, shifting the should and must in this situation could free me up to then work on what was actually kind of needed my attention. That was the fact that I'd had a relapse in anxiety. So this did take some, obviously disputing to change this should and must, there's some excellent examples in the book. But really Albert Ellis hammers home the point that if it really was true that I must not have this situation, then I wouldn't, because it would be a rule of the universe that I wouldn't be having a setback. So therefore I wouldn't be having a setback. So that's already discounted as being untrue, because I was having a setback. That's that. And then it was looking at, okay, so where is it getting me holding on to the belief that I must not be feeling this way? So it would be a case of, looking at, okay, well, as well as feeling anxious, I'm feeling down. I'm losing my appetite again, holding on to this feeling of must. I'm not functioning as well at work because I'm focusing on, desperately thinking, how can I get out of this setback? I'm feeling bad again. I must not feel this way. So I'd be distracted at work. I was not feeling present again. And also, the very big factor that I've just said, it was derailing me from working on the beliefs around my irrational beliefs that were fueling my anxiety cycles, why my OCD had gotten, why I was having a relapse. I wasn't able to focus on that because I was too focused on the fact that I must not be having a relapse in the first place. So once you've listed these reasons that, of the bad things that holding on to this must or should believe, you can really give yourself good reason. Okay, this is why I need to change it. And you're showing your brain why it needs to take on board the new rational belief. Like, ideally, I wouldn't be having a setback because I've worked hard on my OCD recovery, but I can cope. I can tolerate this. So rather than saying I shouldn't be having a setback or I must not be having a setback, it's I would strongly prefer to not be having a setback, but I am, and I'm coping with it because I'm still here. So basically you're changing the belief into I would strongly prefer not to be feeling this way, rather than I must not feel this way, I should not feel this way. You're making it more flexible, because words like should and must are extremely rigid. So another way that one might, and this could be related to anxiety, OCD, or, somebody who isn't necessarily having deep suffering with their mental health, but something like this could end up fueling it. So beliefs maybe around performance. I must always perform at my maximum potential at work. That's an example, you know, somebody who is maybe a proclaimed perfectionist. And, you know, if somebody falls short of performing at their absolute best, then they just feel terrible because they've got this rule for themselves that they must and they should perform at their, you know, optimal performance at all times. And again, this is extremely rigid. So this person can then, you know, because that person holds on to this belief that I must perform at this standard at all times, or I should perform to this standard at all times, if they slightly fall short of it, then they might then sort of get flustered and distract themselves, and then that affects their performance even more. So holding on to these beliefs, it's sort of, as Albert Ellis says, it is shitting all over yourself, because that will be affecting that person's ability to perform at work. And I know this has certainly been sort of deep held belief of mine in the past that I've had to let go of. And, you know, this, if somebody who suffers from anxiety or OCD has this belief, and then they're having a bad day with their OCD, it's just going to fuel their anxiety further, because they think that, you know, they might be suffering with brain fog, and that brain fog might be affecting their performance at work. So then, because they're holding this belief, it's fueling the cycle even more. So again, it would be going back and looking at, you know, what's the irrational belief. So here it would be, I must perform well at all times at work. If not, it'll be terrible. So then you'd look at, okay, well, where is this getting me holding on to this belief? What is good about this? So, okay, you might list one good thing. Well, it keeps me on my toes. It keeps me, you know, giving maximum effort. But actually, when you look at it, it's like, but it's impossible for you to perform at that perfect level at all times. Nobody can maintain a 100% same sort of level at all times. It just, like, people, it's the same works with our moods. You know, our moods are up and down all over the place. And, you know, what if you haven't slept well that night, or what if you're feeling unwell? And then you're not going to be able to perform to your maximum standards. Are you just going to continue beating yourself up and making yourself feel 10 times worse about this? So can you see here where that could be fueling, you know, anxiety, you know, an anxiety cycle in itself? You know, if you hold the belief that I must perform well at all times, you know, regardless, well, what if you sleep badly? And then if you hold on to that belief, is that gonna, what if that ends up keeping you awake because you're worrying, oh, but I have to go to sleep because I'm not going to perform to my best tomorrow at work. And then, and then, you know, and then I'm going to be anxious, and then, you know, the cycle continues. So these are many reasons that you can list for yourself why holding on to that type of belief is not helpful. You know, the same applies for all sort of, I suppose, perfectionist-y statements when we're suffering with OCD and anxiety. A new mother suffering from anxiety or OCD after giving birth might be fueling things further by saying, I must be a perfect mother at all times, otherwise it's unacceptable. And if you have OCD, that could end up, you know, you're fearful of the fact that you're not going to be a perfect mother. And then if you're end up having intrusive thoughts, whether that's, you know, I don't love my child enough, or I'm not being safe enough with my child's bottles, and, you know, the things that mums have, new parents have to do with sterilising bottles and things, and or it might be harm fears or something. So holding on to these musts and shoulds about being a certain way at all times is, you know, it can be a fuel for many different sort of themes and intrusive thoughts when you're suffering with OCD. And the same applies for, you know, if you're having relationship obsessions. I must feel a certain way about my partner, or you should know if you want to be with your partner, or, you know, you shouldn't be having doubts about your partner. And as we know, so you mustn't be having doubts, otherwise that's terrible. Again, this can fuel the cycle again. So what we want to be doing again is being more flexible with these statements. You know, I prefer to not have doubts about my partner, or I prefer to feel like I love my partner all times, but I will cope as I have done to this point if that isn't the case. Because if you're, like I say, if you're saying I should and I must, then then it's just going to fuel the cycle. And the more you feel like that when you have OCD, the more you're not going to feel the way you're absolutely demanding to feel at all times. So again, as I said before, it's looking at, holding on to this belief, where is it getting you? This, like, what's good? What with something like relationship OCD, what good is it doing you to hold on to I should or I must feel that way? All it's doing is making you feel like you might have to end a relationship that you don't want to end. If you were to work on being more flexible, saying I would ideally like to feel a certain way at all times, but I will cope if I don't, and as I have done, then it takes the focus off those feelings and it gives you more space to feel the way you might authentically feel in the moment, rather than constantly having to test yourself for those feelings. So, again, to get to that point, it's listing, what, by holding on to this should or must, am I maybe, as a new mother who's struggling, or a person with relationship OCD, for example, would you maybe feel more present if you were to loosen up your hold on these shoulds and musts and be more flexible and rational? Would you feel more present when you're with your baby, your partner? Would you be sleeping better perhaps because you'll be reducing the anxiety? Will you be maybe then have more energy to pursue other hobbies and things? So you've really got to go in and list these things that are important to you. What do you feel like you might be missing out on because you're holding on to these irrational beliefs about, as we've said in other videos, awfulizing or black and white thinking, and in this case shoulds or musts. So I hope this video has been helpful in terms of identifying some of the ways that we might be fueling our anxiety or particularly low mood by having irrational beliefs using words like should and must. And I think you'll find, particularly where it's kind of a performance-based thing as well, you're probably holding on to those kinds of shoulds and musts. Say like, especially if you're sort of, you're worrying about how your OCD or anxiety is affecting the rest of your life and your performance, look for the should and must, because I feel quite confident that it would be there. There's no certainty with anything, but I think it's worth considering whether you're shoulding all over yourself or you're masturbating too much. So thank you very much for watching this video, and take care. Bye.